My Inner Knowing, empowering you to find your compass for the journey. We are dedicated to supporting you to rediscover and trust your natural ability to navigate life each day by sharing insight and experience through the lens of two professional communicators and their guests. We intend to prompt internal inquiry that supports all those willing to explore a unique path.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Been looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Oh, so Emily, when you think about your inner knowing, and I know we have your book, What is Intuition? What comes to mind for you?
I've been thinking about this, especially over the past few days, knowing we're going to talk.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that we think of inner knowing as something whole and complete and certain. Often, or like aspirationally we do, as if there is a thing that we can attain.
Yeah.
Called inner knowing. And I think I don't really believe that. And I'm not sure if I think it's a helpful notion to holistically consider that there's an inner knowing, capital I, capital K.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm thinking of it that way, as partial, as interactive, and as something that we, more like a process, as something we strive towards, rather than something that I think many times it gets interpreted as a source of perfect, certain knowledge.
Sure.
Kind of like God.
Okay. Interesting.
And that's something that I like to unsettle for us.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Well, if we believe that inner knowing is something that we should have clear access to, if all is well, then it kind of sets up opportunity to fail at that.
Yeah.
And then to, all the things that cascade off of that, which is, I'm not in tune enough, or something is wrong with me that I can't access it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to start us off on one of those notes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. Emily, I appreciate, that lens, because I do feel like for myself, it is a process, and I'm always questioning, what I think is my knowing. It's like, is that what that is? And am I clear? And is how I valued that clear? And I think even very recently for me, being more aware that it is a process as opposed to just an experience. So,
yeah.
A journey, not a destination.
Well,
journey.
Yeah.
I also do think that, and I believe this also, and I teach this to others, that there is a knowingness that we can experience actually all the time, but that it's not always about the big things, but also about the small things.
Yeah.
Like knowing what makes most sense to eat for breakfast.
Yeah.
Or, just really mundane things. And that becomes part for me of the process of hearing or knowing the knowing. Is catching it in small moments.
Yeah.
And again, not that it's inherently correct or only true, but maybe conditionally, like right for now, or
yeah.
Yeah.
When did this journey for you, do you remember when it started? When you started getting more curious about this part of our life experience?
I think maybe I came into the world with it because I don't exactly remember.
Yeah. Do you remember what you were like as a child, or is it more the story of who people told you you were?
It's both. I have some, key memories of being aware of being aware.
Mm-hmm.
One happened when I was very young, so young. I remember that I ran up to hug a man's legs that I thought was my dad, and then I realized it wasn't when I saw my dad over there. So I was young enough that that had happened. I was maybe knee high.
Yeah.
And I remember being aware, like, oh, that happened. And now I have feelings about it. I felt embarrassed. Yeah. So, I have little memories where I was aware of being aware. And then, yeah, there was a whole feedback system that told me over and over again, like that I'm aware, emotionally intelligent. That often looked like I was responsible or, a leader in the classroom or relied on in ways like, hey, can you take care of these other kids for a minute, even though you're also a kid?
Yes.
So that's good news, bad news, I think.
Yeah. So the journey of writing about it, what prompted that?
I didn't know that I was interested in intuition, but I've always been interested in leadership. And what I mean by that, what I thought leadership meant for most, I still do, but what I thought everyone understood as leadership was inner work, the inner work of becoming more conscious and more responsible and more ethical and more aware of oneself. I I kind of didn't realize that for most people, leadership means like position of authority, and then like what you do with that.
Yeah.
Partly because of just the programming that I was exposed to as a kid, and yeah, so I was interested in leadership, and I was also very interested in. Now I'm just going to call it like new age social and spiritual culture.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, okay, I wasn't born until 1979, but I was always so interested in the like 1960s countercultural revolution stuff.
Okay.
And how that was being acted out, I guess, like over the decades. Activists and feminism and social change, people who are working for social change. As I was like involved in a lot of that activism, I realized that many of the people I knew were neglecting their inner lives to the extent that they were unwell, even.
Like physically unwell, emotionally unwell?
A lot of physical unwellness and even depression. I knew some people who even ended their own lives by suicide after, just giving their whole selves to the outside world to make change, and were neglecting their inner lives.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, I got sort of involved in a different counterculture that was more of a like rave counterculture parties and people who were really invested in their personal well-being and also spirituality. And they were not at all involved or interested in the outer change or social change.
Oh, okay.
On purpose. So that's actually what led me to intuition. I know that's like kind of a ramble, but
that's okay.
I was so curious about where's the intersection between the inner and the outer change, and the, what looked like two very different goals. I was curious about how they intersected.
Yeah.
Like, there used to be a lot of narrative of you just have to change yourself to change the world. And then on the other hand, like, don't worry about yourself. Like the world needs you. So, okay, bringing us back to leadership.
Yeah.
The question of like how to be well and be not only for yourself was very important to me.
Yeah.
And I noticed eventually, I'll spare you some of the detail, but the inner work that people were doing to become better leaders, and better meaning more, I guess, the language of authentic or values-led leaders, was the same inner work, really similar to that which I found in New Age self-help books that taught people how to be more psychic. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So this became like the link that I was looking for, where there's, these people invested in their spirituality, neglecting the outside world, the people invested in the outside world, but really neglecting themselves. And I realized that the inner work of self-cultivation was somewhere where they both met.
When you talk about self-cultivation, what do you think of?
Well, I use that language because it comes from some of the scholarship about the ancient Greeks and Romans who were doing work on themselves in order to be better leaders, better citizens.
Okay.
Right. And of course, that only applied to a certain small group of men.
Sure.
But they recognized that in order to govern well, to lead well, they had to know themselves. And so I mostly mean self-reflection and self-awareness. And then I would add that what self means in that situation differs for different groups of people. Like when I think of self, I think of course, the personality and the self that we can know of each other, but then also the self that is connected to all else, capital S self. Yeah, self-cultivation.
When you think about that find about where they intersected, how long ago was that for you?
In 2011, I was in the early months of a PhD program in philosophy of education. And I saw a poster on the wall in the Faculty of Education building. A conference was happening soon that was about values and leadership. It was all about authentic leadership. And something clicked for me, and I kind of made that connection about, again, that inner work that was being done officially for different purposes, but it was the same work. And it made me so curious. I was sort of interested in intuition for a long time. In probably 20 years ago now, I had an attunement to Reiki, which I write about in my book a little bit, and gave me a framework for understanding energy healing, but also just the dimension of experience that is happening on the subtle planes. And at that time, my intuition sort of came online. And all of a sudden, I had started having intuitive experiences that weren't accessible to me before. I didn't even think about that. It's not that it's something I had wanted. I just all of a sudden realized it was happening. And so I would, look around for resources about what that was, and then finding that other people also know about this. And there are things you can do to become more intuitive on purpose. There's, I don't know, now probably I'm going to say 100 books written over the past 30 years. And there's lots from before too, that are about like how to cultivate your intuition. And they all kind of say the same thing. And that's interesting to me. Because they seem to be onto something. They all agree.
When you think about those 100 books, are there a few that stand out to you?
Yeah, there's the first one I ever read. That one stands out because it was the first one. Sonia Choquette, she's a pretty famous.
Yeah, I've met her. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So, and she's a great storyteller. And she's written now tons of books. And frankly, they are all mostly the same.
Okay.
Like they have the same, they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
They're just like, first of all, this is possible for you. And it's possible for me. And here are all my experiences with it. So, the stories that make it really mundane. Like she tells a story about some guest came for dinner that she didn't know before. And for some reason, all that morning, she was like, oh, I'm going to make this particular dessert that she like typically never made. But she just had the intuitive hit to go make this dessert. And when the guest came, he was completely blown away because it was the exact dessert that his father had made for or something. There was some really profound emotional connection for him.
Yeah.
And those things are mundane. And, they're very special because they are mundane in a way, because they're so easy to miss.
Yeah.
Like day to day for us, we could just be like, yeah, I could make that dessert, or I'll just, buy some cookies. We can just overlook those things so like regularly.
Yeah.
But because she was already attuned to the idea that there is psychic awareness, that there's intuitive information, she recognized that she should follow it. Anyway, so that's one book that I enjoyed. There's so many others. Another one that was very important for me is called, actually there's a few called Awakening Intuition, but one of them is by Frances Fawn.
Okay.
Who is a transpersonal psychologist. And that introduced me to the whole world of transpersonal psychology.
Yeah.
Which I'm grateful for, about that. In my day, we used to call things that included spirituality holistic, like holistic education or holistic medicine, or just anything that included the unseen world.
Yeah.
So to find a version of that in psychology felt very important at the time and still is.
Have there been classes that you've taken in energy?
I've studied with a few teachers. They're unofficial classes. They were just like a weekly circle in somebody's house.
Yeah.
We used to call it energy school, but they didn't call it that. That gave me like a repertoire of practice that I've been able to, have forevermore.
Nice. Yeah. Those are special experiences. It's nice that you had access to people who were offering that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate for that because it's not something I ever pursued. In fact, even then I wasn't looking for that. I just happened to be dating this guy and he said, hey, you should come with me to, energy school. And I was like, what's that? Okay. Just at a specific time, I was like available for new experiences.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. But that stuff, like, being introduced to it in that framework, was helpful because I had already been having experiences independently that was showing me, from within, I think, this realm of experience. And I don't know how much you guys talk about this here, but one of those experiences happened as a result of taking psychedelic mushrooms.
No, tell us more.
Okay. So, I was 17, say, and I, did again, just a friend was like, hey, we're going to do this. My parents are out of town. And honestly, I never felt the same afterwards. Like I never thought the same. I was exposed to realms of experience on that trip that I didn't know existed. And then once you know, you just know, right? I assume that it was after that I started having various like awakenings in parts of my energetic system. So there was a time when I had my third eye was awakened and I could see things, whether my eyes were closed or open, differently. And a couple of years after that, it happened at my heart center where all of a sudden I didn't know what it was, actually. It kind of was painful, literally. felt a pressure, but it was excitement at the same time. And I've since felt that in times of like heartbreak, there's like an opening that can happen.
Yeah.
At the time, I think it was more like I felt in love, but not in a particular direction, just in every direction. Anyway, so having had those experiences, I wasn't afraid of them, but I just didn't know if there was anything that I should do or like what to do. And they just sort of went away or settled down on their own. But I know a lot of people do have those kinds of experiences, often in ways that are like uncomfortable or worse. Yeah, so I was lucky that I was then introduced to some kind of like teacher with a framework. I'm saying this because I think that kind of experience seems to be happening more and more.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the age of Aquarius or what's going on, but energetic sensitivity seems to be on the rise. And a lot of people are just sort of wandering around without guidance or teachers or opportunity to integrate them.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. Yeah, that just makes me think of so many things, Emily. My brain went, whoo, yeah.
Bring a philosopher on the podcast.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I'd love to hear what any of those are.
No, I was just thinking about, in my practice, people come in, either have had an experience or wanting to have an experience. And it's interesting because I've not been someone who has taken plant medicine really of any kind. I mean, my body doesn't respond well to alcohol, and it also has some sensitivity to anesthesia where I wake up during surgery. And so I don't really know what that's all about, in regards to my body, but I know there's like an enzymatic issue that's happening. I mean, and no doubt some trauma, when I was young. And so I know we're very complex. So I don't know that I can really explain it, but I did myself think, a few years ago that I wanted to see if I could experience being what I would call compromised, with like Walker here, and then one of my colleagues that I trust, and then a clinician who was experienced in doing the ketamine assisted psychotherapy experience. And so it was actually here in my office that we're recording this in. And, I'm in my recliner and we're going through the process and nothing happens for me still. Wow. And, she gave me 2 doses thinking that maybe that would be it. And all I ended up with was nausea for about 4 days. And it was terrible. Right. And then, Walker and Michelle had more of an experience I did sitting on this couch with eye shades on for 4 hours than I did in the experience. I just was like, I wonder if something's going to happen. And so, and then she had music playing, and then I knew the music, I could tell that the music was like, okay, it's time for this experience to be over. And still like, it just, nothing. And so for me, it's been like, what is that about? I don't know. And I don't really know that anybody can tell me exactly what it's about. And I think, so I have my own experience of not having much of an experience other than, I would say, 4 hours additional practice of being aware of what I was aware of, which I think is something that I do regularly, practicing what I'm aware of. And I have done a lot of that the last 25 years for sure. And then clients, who have been very hopeful, whether it was mushrooms or ayahuasca or ketamine. And it's not something I'm trained in, so I haven't facilitated that or held space for that for people. But I do believe that the set and setting piece, how people can hold, energy, what their intention is, how clear they are. I think all of those things have to be important. And so, yeah, all of that comes to mind when you talk about that.
I don't think we talked about this before, but one of the modalities that I've been apprenticing in facilitating is holotropic breathwork, which is, do you know that?
I do. I have done that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's oftentimes a very similar experience, a psychedelic experience or an entheogenic experience, but without taking anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all about the set and setting.
Yeah.
And just the opportunity or like the requirement of surrendering to your experience.
Yeah. And I feel like that, for me, was a powerful experience. It was a group process. Walker and I were at a conference where they had a session with that, and we did that. And I started breath work about 15 years ago. And this may sound interesting, but I'd taken so much data all the time that doing it underwater with a snorkel is actually much more effective for me.
I can't believe you could even start to do that.
I know. Well,
I wasn't on that one. So
yeah, that was 15 years ago. No, but it was safe until it wasn't safe. And I don't know that I've done it since then, but I had a teaching assistant who really struggled with me. It was like a 2-year program, and she, triggered me very intentionally before a session. And that was very difficult because being underwater isn't something that I like to do. So when I found that process so helpful, and then it was like taken. But, our journey continues, and
for sure.
And we just keep exploring. I mean, I keep exploring. I will, I'm sure, until.
So do I. I mean, what's the point otherwise?
Yeah.
I think.
Right. Well, for me, it is for sure.
Yeah. For us and for probably most people listening.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, there's so many modalities, and I like exploring them and, finding, what's helpful to me. Man, there's so many things I've done over the years
I've been, studying like New Age spirituality for a very long time, and as a meaning making process, for people who, especially people who either don't grow up with a religion or who just aren't into the religion that they grew up into.
Sure.
There's so much opportunity to seek and to explore. And one of the things that I've always been concerned about, I guess you could say, is that because there are so many opportunities to explore new things, we often don't allow any one thing to become our thing. So that means that we might not be touching the depth of the quality of experience that could be available.
Yeah.
That we can give up too quickly on any one kind of process. And, this is what I found in all the New Age self-help books about cultivating intuition. There's only like 5 practices, say, and everyone's sort of recommending the same range of practice. But it's possible to say, oh, no, that one's not working for me, and then go to another one before you've really given it a chance. The other thing is that we don't tend to have long-term teachers.
Yes.
Or mentors. And, that's sort of a similar pattern. Like if we're just going in one class for a weekend workshop and then we are on our own now, the integration piece is missing. And we forget that the practices, the inner work is meant to exist within us and within our relationships in the whole world that we exist, not just contained at the retreat center.
Yes.
Yeah. And, again, like sometimes that means that people don't get deep enough and that don't get the whole benefit of the practice, because practices are inherited within systems. But then, as in the New Age, we sort of forgo the whole system often and just take the, distill a practice as if it's enough. But then on the other hand, sometimes people go too deep and then they don't have the teacher with a ladder or a rope pulling them back to shore.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, the balance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do with this dearth of teachers?
It's such a good question in terms of inner knowing. I think because a lot of times it's recommended to us that we simply only rely on our inner teacher. And I actually think that we all could maybe have access to an inner teacher, but it can be hard to find her. Hard to know her voice from others.
Yes. Yes.
I also think for the most part, a lot of us can kind of cool it on seeking new practices. I think that there's a kind of a trend of just looking outward or for another different thing instead of a bit more acceptance of what's in front of us.
What are you thinking when you say that?
I'm thinking of this group of people that I referred to before who were the partying seekers who are like so invested in inner work, but actually in the direction of transcendence, trying to get out into some kind of cosmic unity, and then neglecting that there's imminent spirituality as well. The stuff that's right in front of us, the kind of meaningful experience that could be found in preparing and sharing a meal.
Yeah.
Or like recognizing that you're already there. You just don't know it. So if you're trying to travel, you might be missing all of the steps along the way that are also meaningful if we make them meaningful.
Yeah. It's interesting. When you were saying that, I was thinking about how when I more intentionally started to try to understand myself and energy, there were, different experiences I had. And there was this, I don't know what word I want to use, if it's expectation or, kind of direction giving, that was supposed to be where I was going, was that transcendence piece. And it didn't ever speak to me, but I didn't understand it until I was having a session with a woman who was trained in energy work. And she would talk about my energy and like the higher parts of, my energy, if you're looking at it from like a chakra place. And she gave me feedback that, that I had heard many times. But she said it, but I don't know that it matters so much unless your feet are on the ground. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And so she was the one who really brought into my awareness about being grounded. And that resonated with me like immediately and shifted everything for me after that.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very powerful. And so for me, it's a big part of what I offer people and talk about is being here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, here's where the work is.
Right.
Here's where it's uncomfortable and messy and like dirty.
Yeah.
And like, why else have a human experience if not to experience humanity?
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. No, and I really appreciated your sharing, about even that wider focus, because I mean, so much of my work is finding that balance between like taking care of myself and offering what I can to humanity. And so easier for me to look outward in how to care. I'm continuing to learn how to take care of myself so that what I'm offering, I can do well.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, from an entanglement perspective, which is, in my book, an attempt at least to understand that the outer world and the inner world are not different from each other. They're different, but they're not distinct. So when you do take care of others, you can assume that you are taking care of yourself when you take care of yourself. And I don't believe that we can care for ourselves out of social problems. Like the kind of focus inward instead of looking outward. Like you can't resolve poverty by breath work.
Right.
Now, some people say you can, and maybe to some extent you can for some people, but not generally. We can't exactly meditate our way out of capitalism, is what I think I'm trying to say. And there was, I think it's a little bit turning now. People recognize that a little bit better, but there have been, some decades where that seemed to be, people were trying for that.
You mean like the use of energy versus action?
Yes. And also leveraging spiritual practice or self-cultivation work instead of acting or considering the collective. When I was doing master's degree studies in England, and this isn't about England, but there was a trend to use mindfulness practice in schools. It was here too.
Yeah.
But not to help students understand themselves better or recognize, a greater self within, but actually more like for behavioral control.
What
like
are you talking about, Emily? I don't know.
And we saw that come to corporate as well.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of corporate wellness is, this is cynical, but I don't think it's inaccurate. Like, let our employees be, let off some steam with yoga at lunchtime so that they come back to be more productive workers. Not so that they're inherently happier, intrinsically more well, but so that they will make us more money. I say that as often as I can because I don't want people to be confused that these are for the same purpose.
Yeah.
Even though they might look the same on the outside.
Sure.
Two people sitting on a mat cross-legged with a closed eye.
Right.
And even though there is intrinsic benefit, sure, possibly available. But it's like, I don't know, when a factory is trying to unionize and the bosses bring in pizza.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of a bonus, we're going to give you like a pizza lunch or something like that. Like it's just a little,
right.
That I feel is cynical. And because they look the same and because everything that is happening inside is unseen to others, just feel like it's one of those opportunities to just remember why we might want to be doing inner work.
Yeah. Yeah. What's our intention for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something that gets missed often. Why are we doing what we're doing?
Yeah. And, a little bit this goes back to people trying to, I guess we could use the word bypass all of the sort of mundane opportunities for spiritual fulfillment and try and find the highest practice, the one that gets you out the furthest in the cosmos. Probably the highest practice is whichever one is going to serve you the now where you're at, is going to meet you where you're at. But, you read a book and find out that somebody lost their mind in a happy way for 10 days. And then like the thrill seeking of that is kind of amusing to me. It's not my style. I'd rather just be chill. When I had, openings of various chakras, like I wasn't seeking that. And maybe that's like a privilege that I didn't have to go seeking that. For me, I would rather have kind of a low key happiness day to day than like full on exploded macro happiness once in a while.
Sure. Me too. Yeah.
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 The macro happiness is pretty great when it happens, though.
Totally. But if I had to choose, I think I would go for, I think right now I'm settling for like micro, but then occasional macro doses.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like they happen more organically, the macro, as opposed to seeking them. Like they're just there. Yeah, which is lovely.
Yeah, I decided to actually seek that in not in terms of happiness, but around the framework of pleasure. That I decided that I needed to feel like more joy and more just like daily stuff. This was a couple of years ago when, especially in lockdown times, when that was less available. So it became important to me that I was like seeking micro moments of pleasure, whatever that meant. Having a whiff of a scent that I enjoy, or taking a 5-minute dance break, or some kind of like really micro. And then I realized that the macro is missing. I became more intentional about that, because for me that meant often like taking time off and planning activities with friends, like bigger things. I can't remember why we started talking about this.
That's okay.
Love a tangent.
Oh, so Emily, when you think about where you are now, do you set goals for yourself, or what's your process as you keep stepping forward?
As I continue to take on more of a role of mentor of inner work, I now feel like I have to be a lot more intentional about my own practice. So I've been a real, not reluctant practitioner, but casual. Everything from, all my practices that I have, let's say a whole basket of practices that include meditation, movement, writing, talking, various things. I could always kind of take them or leave them. And I still don't have strong routines, but I'm more intentional about making sure that each bucket of that kind of work is not full, but like has some content, is getting some attention.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, it's a little bit of a different answer, but is that I still have a goal, and it probably will always be a goal, of learning to trust myself.
Yeah.
And whether that is about my inner practice or just about like the choices I'm making in life in general.
Yeah.
And trusting myself and trusting my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did an episode recently called Do I Trust Myself? Yeah. I think about, we can do a lot of work, and I feel like we can get stuck if that isn't a goal.
What do you mean?
I think for me, learning to trust myself, this process of learning to trust myself, practicing, helps me I don't know. I'm trying to think of the words. Keep moving is what is what came to mind, but I don't know. I don't know that is, the most accurate way to represent it. I mean, I think about it in so many different ways. I think about trusting myself in regards to knowing that I will always be okay, even if I'm not right now. that if I lost everything, I would be okay. That I put effort and intention into making my choices, and it doesn't mean that I always see clearly, even if I think that I am in that moment. But I know that I'm always learning about myself, regardless of the process. And I trust that in myself, that will never stop. And so I think it's a lot of things. I mean, that feed into that, but that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it brings us full circle to where Emily started today. Kind of there are those times where you just have to trust the process. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's hard, walking people through that, or walking yourself through those times where the intuition or your inner knowing is not crystal clear. I mean, we all love those moments where you just absolutely know your body is singing and there it is. And then there's other times where, at least I feel like I'm not in touch with it. And so what you just said about, my brain turned that into faith, basically, and not necessarily a religious faith, just faith in that, it will come, that all will be well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think also truly sometimes there isn't an absolute yes or no or right or wrong in so many circumstances. And if we're waiting for the clear yes, it might not come because it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And so our job is really just, to keep moving in some direction. And if we mess it up, trust that we can fix it or that it'll right itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I say stay in action. That's what I say. Stay in action.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you take the stamp off of good experience and bad experience, and it's just all lessons, it's something that I'm trying to move towards. It's hard though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stepping out of the binary.
Yeah. I was just going to say we were trained so well, for most of us into good and bad, or right and wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. So, Emily, what would be something that you haven't shared that you would like to share before we wrap up?
Thank you for asking that. Nothing really comes to mind. I feel like I've shared so widely of, a spectrum of many things that I think and believe. I'll just emphasize an idea that I'm really almost compulsive about these days, which is that if we can step back from correctness or incorrectness, right or wrong, and allow ourselves to be uncertain and risk uncertainty for even just a while, more possibilities open up than we knew about before.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
And it feels, things can feel more open, more rich. There's a lot more potential available when we let ourselves be in the muck for a while.
I agree. One of the things we talk about too is it's messy. Yeah. So your book, What is Intuition? What's the easiest place for people to find that?
Well, the book has a website. It's whatisintuition.ca.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in Canada. And there you can, have a fast link to Amazon, or you can also special order it in any bookstore. So you can walk over and get it. But if you like the ebook version, that's where to get it.
Any other opportunities that you would like to share with people?
Well, it is resonant right now that because of a lot of what we talked about, energy and chakras and things like that, I'm running a workshop. The listeners of this will have missed it.
Okay.
But it will, fingers crossed, be available to receive in replay form on the heart's intelligence, on cultivating the energy of the heart. I'm running it on Friday. It's work that I've been reluctant to share because it's quite powerful, but it feels timely. Just all of the good qualities of compassion, courage, creativity that can arise from literally the heart. The heart is an organ of perception. I write about this a little bit. Actually capturing information a fraction before the brain. What? And we spend so much time cultivating our beautiful brains, but not so much time cultivating the heart. And so that's some work that I'm beginning, starting with this workshop.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Hopefully if people, just find me on the internet, and that should be available too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for spending this time with us.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. We hope we get to do it again. There'll be more to share.
That'd be lovely.
Emily.
Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah.
So nice. I'm so glad that you're here talking about this stuff. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to explore life with you. We encourage curiosity, self-growth, and we strive to be more compassionate every day.